All right, let's dive in. Today we're tackling Jordan Peterson and this whole idea of finding meaning in life.
Ah, Peterson. Always gets you thinking, right?
Absolutely. And the source material we've got for this deep dive, it's this fascinating YouTube video just packed with clips from his lectures and writings. Really gets to the core of his message.
Yeah, and he doesn't hold back. Happiness, responsibility, even suffering all those big questions about what makes a life good.
Definitely. Like right off the bat, he hits us with this stark reality check about work.
Hmm.
Saying the clock is ticking if you're stuck in a job you hate.
Oh, yeah. Really makes you think twice about clinging to things that just drain you, doesn't it?
It does. And it's funny because he actually flips the script on this whole idea of meaningful work being a luxury.
Right. He says it's actually the soul-crushing job that's the real luxury. A costly one at that.
Ah, yeah, I like that. It's like he's saying, wake up. And
Yeah.
then he takes it even further. He says, pursuing meaning isn't just a good idea, it's a moral obligation.
That's Peterson for you. Doesn't mince words.
No, he doesn't. And this actually ties into something else that struck me, the distinction he makes between meaning and happiness. Like he says, pursuing happiness is a luxury, but meaning is a duty. What do you make of that?
It's a really interesting point. I think for Peterson, meaning is all about responsibility, taking on challenges, having a sense of purpose, something bigger than just yourself.
I see. So it's that deeper satisfaction that comes from contributing, whereas happiness can be.
Fleeting, right.
Exactly.
Often depends on things outside of your control. Like that feeling you get when you buy a new phone. Great at first, then fades. Need a new something to chase that feeling again?
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Meaning is more about the long game then. But then he uses this analogy of picking up burdens, which sounds kind of heavy.
Right. It's a powerful image, though, isn't it?
It is. What's he getting at with that?
Well, think about it. Taking care of your family, building something of your own, making a difference in your community, all those things, they are kind of like burdens. Take
Mhm.
effort, sacrifice. Sometimes, yeah, even pain.
I guess so. But you get something back, right?
You do. A deep sense of purpose, something that fleeting happiness can't really match.
So meaning comes from shouldering those responsibilities, from facing challenges head on. Okay, I'm starting to see how this all connects. But this leads into another point he makes, that life is inherently difficult, tragic even. He's not sugarcoating it.
No, not at all.
So how do we cope? I mean, if that's the starting point.
Well, for Peterson, that's where meaning becomes the antidote to suffering. He argues that if you can find meaning in those struggles, you can rise above the bitterness, the resentment that might come with them.
Find meaning in the struggle. So it gives you a reason to keep striving even when things are tough.
Exactly.
Powerful idea. And then this is where things get really interesting. He connects this idea of meaning to self-transcendence, that concept of always trying to become a better version of yourself. What's the link there?
Well, think of it like this, the classic hero myth, right? The hero faces chaos, battles their own limitations, and through that struggle, they're transformed, right?
Yeah, they come out the other side changed.
Exactly. And the world around them has changed too. I think that's what Peterson means by self-transcendence. It's not just about being better, it's about recognizing that we're not fixed. We can evolve, become more than we are today.
So it's about pushing our boundaries, facing fears, striving for something greater. And what I like is he doesn't just leave it at these big ideas. He offers practical steps to actually start this process.
Right.
Like, remember that bit about stopping the things you know in W are wrong, even if they're small?
Oh, yeah, that's such a good point. Because it is about taking ownership, right? Acknowledging where we're falling short and then making a conscious effort to change. Even starting with small things.
Even small things.
Even something as simple as making your bed, right?
To make your bed, yeah.
Can create space for greater self-awareness, I think. And then from there, that continued growth.
It's like planting a seed.
Yeah.
Even a tiny one can grow into something magnificent if it's
Yeah.
given the right conditions.
Exactly. And by stopping those bad habits, we're basically clearing away the weeds, right? Creating that fertile ground for positive change to take root. And it's not just about tidiness, is it? It's about aiming upward, taking control, even in a small way.
Yeah, it's like that old saying, how you do anything is how you do everything. So starting small can actually lead to big changes.
Absolutely. But one thing that's always fascinated me about Peterson
Yeah.
is the pushback he gets. Like, why do some people react so negatively to his ideas? What do you think that's about?
That's a great question. And he actually addresses that himself. It's almost like some people recognize they're not living up to these ideals, so it's easier to just attack the message than confront your own shortcomings, right?
Oh, yeah. Classic defense mechanism. Deflect and distract.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But Peterson seems to be saying that discomfort you're feeling, that's actually a signal, a sign there's room for growth.
Right. He doesn't shy away from how difficult self-reflection can be.
No, he doesn't. He's like, yeah, it's brutal. Taking stock of who you are, facing your flaws.
But he argues it's in that confrontation that you find the potential for transformation.
He talks about actively seeking out those rotten parts of ourselves, the things that need to be fixed.
Mm-hmm.
But no one enjoys that. I mean, it's painful. So how do we do that without getting completely overwhelmed by all the negativity?
It's a good question. I love the analogy he uses here. It goes back to that hero myth again.
Oh, yeah?
The hero doesn't shy away from the darkness, from the chaos, right? They confront it head on, wrestle with it. And through that struggle, they bring forth something new, something better.
That reminds me of the story he tells about his daughter and her struggle with juvenile rheumatoid arthritis.
Heartbreaking story.
It is.
Yeah.
But it also shows the resilience of the human spirit,
Yeah.
He talks about facing unimaginable pain, but still finding a way to live a meaningful life.
Right. Really drives home the point that life throws curveballs.
It does.
There will be suffering. There will be challenges we can't control.
So it's how we respond to those challenges that really shapes us.
Absolutely.
He talks about finding beauty, even in the darkest of times. But how do you cultivate that perspective when everything feels like it's falling apart?
He actually suggests a really practical approach. Narrow your time frame. Like if next month feels impossible to think about.
Yeah.
Focus on next week. If that's too much, get through the day, the hour, even the next minute.
Just keep putting one foot in front of the other.
Exactly. It's about finding ways to cope, to keep moving forward one step at a time.
Finding those little glimmers of hope, those small things we can hold on to when everything else feels overwhelming. And this is where he makes a really profound statement. In the worst situation, you can make it only tragic and not hell.
Yeah.
And he's like, there's a big gap between tragedy and hell.
Wow. What a distinction.
It is, right?
Really speaks to the power of perspective, doesn't it?
It does.
Even in the face of suffering, tragedy, we still have a choice.
About how we frame our experiences. That choice is at the heart of Peterson's philosophy. We can choose to wallow, or we can choose to rise, to find meaning in the midst of the suffering.
It's a powerful idea.
It is. But how do we actually put that into practice? It's one thing to talk about finding meaning. It's another to live it out day after day.
Right.
Well, she offers some guidance. Remember that emphasis on having truthful conversations?
Oh, yeah.
It's not just with others. It's with ourselves, too. Being honest about what motivates us, our fears, aspirations.
Asking those tough questions.
And being willing to listen to the answers, even if they make us uncomfortable. Like that example he uses of going to a clinical psychologist.
Yeah.
It's not just about getting help when things are really bad. It's about being proactive, being willing to dig deep.
Uncover those roots.
Yeah.
And then, of course, work towards solutions.
And this all circles back to that idea of self-transcendence, right?
Yeah.
That journey of self-discovery and improvement.
It's a process, not a destination.
Letting go of the old you, the parts that hold you back.
Embracing the potential.
Becoming the best version of yourself. And that's where Peterson says we find true meaning, not in fleeting pleasures, not in external validation, but in that constant striving.
Powerful stuff.
And he argues that this is where we find meaning. But it takes commitment, right?
It does. It takes discipline.
Remember that line, discipline is the root of all good qualities. It's about cultivating that inner strength, that grit that lets you persevere.
And make those tough choices that lead to a better life.
Exactly. And it's not just about waking up early or sticking to a rigid schedule.
No, it's about having the strength to do what's right, even when it's hard.
Applying it to your physical well-being, emotional, mental.
Not showing up for yourself day after day, even when you really don't want to.
That's discipline. And he also emphasizes the importance of having a plan.
Yeah.
Even if it's not perfect, just start somewhere. Take action. Learn along the way.
You don't need all the answers up front, right?
Right. Be willing to experiment, to fail, to keep learning and growing.
Be willing to adjust course when you need to.
Yeah. Plans aren't set in stone.
Exactly.
As you grow, your goals, your priorities, they might shift.
It's a journey.
It is. But one thing that seems constant in Peterson's message, though,
What's that?
is this idea of aiming upward, constantly striving for something better, something more. He uses that imagery of Raising yourself out of the mire.
Oh, yeah.
Reaching for something higher.
Have that aspirational mindset.
Believe that we can always improve, always grow.
And that upward striving, that's what gives life meaning.
It's what lets us transcend our limitations, right?
Yeah.
Become more than we thought possible.
And even if it's just a small step each day.
Remember that line. A small step today puts you in a position to take a slightly bigger step the next day. And then that puts you in a position to take a slightly bigger step the next day. You do that for 2 or 3 years, man, you're starting to stride.
It's powerful, that compounding of small wins over time.
It really is.
And it can have a profound impact on our lives.
So we've covered a lot of ground here. Responsibility, suffering, this idea of self-transcendence, and of course the importance of discipline. But where do we go from here? How do we actually take these big ideas that Peterson talks about and apply them to our own lives?
Well, I think he gives us a good starting point, right? He says, you're most fundamentally that which, if it confronts its problems, can solve them.
Ooh, I like that.
It's like a call to action, you know?
It is.
We're not defined by our problems, but by how we face them.
We become problem solvers, not victims.
Exactly. And in that facing, in that striving, we discover a strength that we didn't even know we had.
We tap into this resilience that lets us overcome even those really daunting challenges. And that resilience, that grit, it comes from discipline. It's about making those tough choices, day after day, even when we don't feel like it.
Yeah.
Pushing ourselves beyond our comfort zone.
Embracing the discomfort of growth.
Right. But Peterson also says discipline isn't just about that physical self-improvement, is it?
It's not. It's about applying that same kind of rigor to our emotional well-being, our mental well-being.
So it's more about becoming masters of our own minds.
Yeah, instead of being slaves to our impulses. Right.
Right.
It takes work, though, doesn't it?
It does. It takes practice. It takes commitment. But it also sounds incredibly freeing.
Oh, it is. It's a real sense of freedom, but it takes courage to confront your own weaknesses, admit where you're falling short, and then be willing to change.
Because ultimately, that change, that growth, it impacts more than just us as individuals.
Right, absolutely.
It ripples outward. Like he talks about how taking care of ourselves lets us better care for our families, our communities, even the world around us.
He calls it those expanding circles of responsibility.
I like that. It starts with ourselves, but it doesn't end there.
It goes beyond us.
And in that outward expansion, I think that's where we find a deeper purpose. We realize that our lives, they're all interconnected. And our actions, they really do have the power to make a difference.
Peterson's message, it is a call to action, isn't it? It's a challenge to step up, to take responsibility for our lives, to strive for something more.
To create meaning.
Yes. Meaning isn't something that's just handed to us, is it?
It's not. It's something we create through our choices, through our actions, through our commitment to becoming better versions of ourselves.
Well said.
And as challenging as that journey might be, I think ultimately it's the path to a more fulfilling life, a more meaningful life. So as we wrap up this deep dive into Jordan Peterson's work, I just want to encourage everyone listening to think about what really resonated with you. What's one small step you can take today to start applying these principles? Remember, it's not about being perfect. It's about progress. It's about showing up for yourself every day and making that effort to move forward, even if it's just one tiny step at a time.